All right, so let's start off by talking about the video we watched on the Great Depression. You knew a lot of that, right? That's just basic history stuff. So we know this is an issue. A lot of those programs they talked about, like the SEC, if you paid attention to all that stuff with GameStop and AMC, that's theaters, right? They mentioned the SEC multiple times. They're not the football conference, the Securities and Exchange, which is like they're policing whether what's going on is okay or not. Because the stock market, as we just saw, can be manipulated greatly, and not just by a bunch of people on Reddit, by actually rich people who've been doing it for years. All right, so the SEC is in charge of making sure, like if Quentin all of a sudden sells a bunch of stock in something, and the next day that company he sold stock in plummets and they close, but somehow he, and then it went from $10 a share to $2.50, but he sold all of it the day before out of nowhere. That raises a red flag. They're like, who told you something was going on? That's not fair. You're not allowed to do that. And I don't know what they'll do to you, but I mean, they're going to do something. So those types of things, and like they said, with the people who got 10 cents on the dollar in the bank, the FDIC insures a certain amount of money. That's a big amount, more than most of us in here will ever have in the bank, that if that was to happen again, you're not going to lose your money. You're still going to get it. So it's safe to put it in the bank. Because can you imagine what it was like in the 30s for people after the Great Depression? I'm not putting any of my money in the bank. It's why some of maybe you don't know them, but me, my great-grandma was born in 1900. She still lived when I was a kid, and she didn't put anything in the bank. She had the whole mattress with money in it and stuff. I mean, she did that because she was terrified that the banks were going to lose her money, even though the FDIC prevents that. All right. So why are we studying all this? Because you remember I don't know if you saw it near the end, there was a picture of a really dirty looking woman, black and white. That is the most famous picture, and we're going to talk about it in a little bit. Most famous picture from the Great Depression era, and about the poverty they saw. 25% of the people in the country were unemployed, and yeah, we got close to that back. I don't think we hit 25, but we got pretty close to it back about a year ago. You know, after when coronavirus and everything, the lockdown first started happening, a lot of people started losing their jobs. This is still ahead of us, but we got kind of close in a lot of ways. Thank God there's a lot of protection in place right now, or we could have ended up in worse shape. All right? But anyway, so we're going to look today at a couple of things. The first one we're going to look at is a little excerpt from The Grapes of Wrath. It's a book by John Steinbeck. I actually was going to have the honors class read that, and you guys are going to read Of Mice and Men, which is very short. But I need to retool those a little bit before I do it. Of Mice and Men has a lot of language concerns in it. I mean, it's not words you haven't heard before, and it's totally fitting for the people of the time period. It's based on two itinerant farmhands. You know what itinerant means? It means they travel around. Okay, wherever the job is, they go. All right, so they're going to use bad language. All right, it's also set in the 20s, so there's some racial issues in it. Okay, it's a great story, but I kind of was like, I don't know if I want to do this one yet. They've done it before. They did it last year. It's totally been acceptable. Doesn't mean I want to do it. I punted Grapes of Wrath because it's a big book, and I just knew what I was going to get if I suggested, hey, let's read a 400-page book. Everyone was going to mutiny, and I might be, tossed out a window. So I got to rethink that, but we're going to read an excerpt of it, okay? And you're going to think this has nothing to do with the Great Depression, all right? But let's look at it. The first thing you need is a term. The term's allegory. You know what an allegory is? We've talked about it before, but I don't expect you to remember. What's an allegory? You can cheat and look at 756 and read it and sound really smart if you want to.
An allegory is a narrative in which every literal element has a symbolic meaning.
Perfect. Look at that. Good job. Okay, so an allegory is, like the book says, a narrative in which every literal element has a symbolic meaning. So everything in an allegory actually means something else. Think about Jesus' parables, right? Those are allegories. When Jesus is telling the parable of the sower, everything, the seed, the ground, the person sowing it, all represents somebody else, right? Same thing we're going to look at here. This story is called The Turtle. What do you think it's going to be about? A turtle. Good guess, right? Okay, let's look at it. It's not a very long section, and like I said, the book itself is quite long, so you are getting an excerpt. All right, so let's read this. Let's get the background first, which a lot of that just covered it. It says, the Great Depression of the 1930s was a time of profound economic distress. In 1932, 1/4 of all Americans were out of work. One of the many factors contributing to the Depression was a drought in Oklahoma. The drought was so severe that farmland literally blew away in massive dust storms. They're not kidding. Farmland was just gone. There's a certain amount of soil that you can grow stuff in, and below that, it's not going to work. And they were losing it because of just not understanding how farming should work. You can't just go out there and plant whatever you feel like. There's some system you should put in place. It says, this is the situation faced by the Jode family, whose story Steinbeck tells in his novel, The Grapes of Wrath. This tale of the turtle is the third chapter of that epic book. Epic book means it's a big, long book. The character here, Tom Jode, is a famous cultural character. Bruce Springsteen had a song about him, an whole album about him. And these people that travel from Oklahoma, we've got another video we'll show when I'm done with this part of them called the Okies, if you ever heard of that, and what they went through. People traveling from Oklahoma out west typically to try to find some sort of job because, Oklahoma was done for at that point. So this is about a turtle. Seems to have nothing to do with the Great Depression or starving people, but let's see what it does. Because the concrete highway was edged with a mat of tangled, broken, dry grass, and the grass heads were heavy with oat beards to catch on a dog's coat, and foxtails to tangle in a horse's fetlocks, and clover burrs to fasten in sheep's wool. Sleeping life waiting to be spread and dispersed, every seed armed with an appliance of dispersal, twisting darts and parachutes for the wind, little spears and balls of tiny thorns, and all waiting for animals and for the wind, for a man's trouser cuff or the hem of a woman's skirt, all passive but armed with appliances of activity, still but each possessed of the anglage of movement. Okay, so right away everybody's like, it's a lot of description. This time period, 1800s, description, early 1900s, they're descriptive as can be. The sun lay on the grass and warmed it, and in the shade under the grass the insects moved, ants and ant lions to set traps for them, grasshoppers to jump into the air and flick their yellow wings for a second, sow bugs like little armadillos plodding restlessly on many tender feet. And over the grass at the roadside a land turtle crawled. All right, here's our turtle, so we know this part, zoom back in. Turning aside for nothing, dragging his high domed shell over the grass. His hard legs and yellow-nailed feet threshed slowly through the grass, not really walking, but boosting and dragging his shell along. The barley beard slid off his shell, and the clover burrs fell on him and rolled into the ground. His horny beak was partly opened, and his fierce, humorous eyes under brows like fingernails stared straight ahead. He came over the grass, leaving a beaten trail behind him, and the hill, which was a highway embankment, reared up ahead of him. So right away, okay, let's just go ahead and, if I told you this was an allegory and the turtle's supposed to represent something else, it represents these people, okay? We just go ahead and get that one out of the way. Allegories aren't meant to be that clever, okay? It's why I always laugh when I read the Bible. It's like, the disciples can't figure this out. I could teach this in my regular classes, and you guys would be like, oh, that means that, and that. Y'all don't struggle with that. The disciples were a little bit thick-headed sometimes, okay? But hey, come on, they were working class people. That's okay. They weren't going to Cottage Hill, college prep school. They weren't doing that. So this turtle is meant to represent these Okies, these people traveling. Look what we see already. The fact is the turtle, does he describe it as it's walking, easily? Not at all. He describes it like it's dragging itself. It's perseverance, man. He knows that life's tough. All that description at the beginning of all the traps in the grass, all the different things. Like you've been to the beach before and you get those stupid little spurs on you that hurt so bad. If you don't know they're there, like me all the time. I don't know it. Now there's a bug coming by and I go to swat that bug and then I'm going to say something I probably shouldn't because I just slam one of those things into my leg. All right, so that kind of thing. This turtle's going through all of that. It's bouncing off of his shell. He's a turtle. He's got a shell. Good for him. But, these same people are going through all these daily things. You know how hard it was to travel from Oklahoma out west or back to the east if you wanted to go. It's not like these guys had cars at this point. If they did, how are you paying for gas? There's all these different things. You're just taking everything you own, barely any way to survive, and just trying to get to the next stop. Really tragic thing. All right. He came over the grass, leaving a beaten trail behind him in the hill, which was the highway embankment reared up ahead of him. For a moment he stopped, his head held high. He blinked and looked up and down. At last he started to climb the embankment. Front clawed feet reached forward but did not touch. The hind feet kicked his shell along, and it scraped on the grass and on the gravel. As the embankment grew steeper and steeper, the more frantic were the efforts of the land turtle. Pushing hind legs strained and slipped, boosting the shell along, and the horny head protruded as far as the neck could stretch. Little by little, the shell slid up the embankment until at last a parapet cut straight across its line of march, the shoulder of the road, a concrete wall 4 inches high. As though they worked independently, the hind legs pushed the shell against the wall. The head upraised and peered over the wall to the broad, smooth plain of cement. Now the hands, braced on top of the wall, strained and lifted, and the shell came slowly up and rested its front end on the wall. For a moment, the turtle rested. So, again, if you've ever watched a turtle try to go up something, it's sad and it's kind of funny, I guess, if you want to be jerks like we tend to be. But, it's not easy. If it's going up a steep, like in the sand or something, I've seen them before, when we used to live down near Dolphin Island, and we go out to the island sometimes, and you might see a turtle or something out there in the sand, and that's kind of funny because it's hard for me to walk in the sand. Can you imagine a turtle dragging its shell through that and then trying to go up a sand dune or something? That's not going to go well. But he pulls it off. Did you notice that? He does it. A lot of effort, but he gets there. The head upraised and peered over the wall to a broad, smooth plane of cement. Now the hands, braced on top of the wall, strained and lifted. The shell came slowly up and rested its front end on the wall. For a moment, the turtle rested. A red ant ran into the shell, into the soft skin inside the shell, and suddenly head and legs snapped in, and the armored tail clamped in sideways. So an ant gets in there and bites him. He's got all this protection, but still, there's things that get to him. Again, every detail in an allegory may have a parallel, so we'll come back to it. It says, the red ant was crushed between body and legs, and one head of a wild oats was clamped into the shell by a front leg. For a long moment, the turtle lay still, and then the neck crept out, and the old, humorous, frowning eyes looked about, and the legs and tail came out. The back legs went to work, straining like elephant legs, and the shell tipped to an angle so that the front legs could not reach the level cement plane. But higher and higher, the hind legs boosted it, until at last the center of balance was reached. The front tipped down, the front legs scratched at the pavement, and it was up. But the head of wild oats was held by its stem around the front legs. Now the going was easy, and all the legs worked, and the shell boosted along, waggling from side to side. A sedan driven by a 40-year-old woman approached. She saw the turtle and swung to the right, off the highway. The wheels screamed, and a cloud of dust boiled up. Two wheels lifted for a moment and then settled. The car skidded back onto the road and went on, but more slowly. The turtle had jerked into its shell, but now it hurried on, for the highway was burning hot. Okay, so think again, all of this is supposed to have parallels. So it finally gets over that hill, that initial thing, and then it gets to the highway, and what are some problems it's presented with now? Yeah, there's cars coming that way. Now, this lady tries to miss him, but even then, dust is thrown up everywhere and things like that, and the turtle's having to move even faster now because what? The pavement's hot. So just because you get past one obstacle doesn't mean you don't have a whole new set. You keep looking to, okay, I'm waiting to get to that road, then everything's going to be okay. But is it? Nope, it's a whole new set of problems. Can you see how that parallels these people traveling? Okay, we got to get out of here. We got all our stuff into our car or our wagon or whatever. We start moving. We're going to get past this point, and now we're just going to have new problems. Even if they finally get out west, what problems do you have if you gave up everything you had back in Oklahoma and you're going to California? Once you get to California, is everything going to be okay? No? Did the Great Depression just hit Oklahoma? And the Dust Bowl happened on top of that. So yeah, we'll go out west where there's still plenty of farmland, except there's no jobs. And now you got a whole bunch of refugees out there. And refugees don't just come from other countries. You got a whole bunch of refugees that have moved from Oklahoma and have nothing and are dirt poor. Now they're in California where they still have nothing. So you're just trading one set of problems for another set. But really at some point, just like this turtle, you just have to do something. What are you going to do, lay there and die? That's your other option. Imagine the frustration these people are faced with. And that's really what Steinbeck's trying to capture in The Grapes of Wrath. You don't see the same thing in Of Mice and Men, but you still see elements of it about these people have a dream and they just want to do anything they can to get there. We talk about the American dream throughout the year. These poor people just want to be able to provide for their family. It's not even, I want a golden toilet and a yacht. It's, I want to have, I want to survive. And this turtle's dealing with that right now. It says, and now a light truck approached, and as it came near, the driver saw the turtle and swerved to hit it. Uh-oh. This is different than the last lady. What'd the first lady do? Tried to miss him. What's this one doing? They're trying to hit him. Now, how does that parallel? Yeah, guys, come on. You got to understand that, a lot of people might try to, not harm these people or try to find ways to help them a little bit, maybe a soup kitchen or something to help them out. A lot of people are gunning for people like this. Maybe not running over them with cars, maybe. But there was also this whole negative stereotype of these people that came up. We still have it today. Well, I hate hearing you guys say this. You go to town and well, those poor people should use that money to buy beer, so we don't help them out. Okay, well that makes two crappy people in this equation. All right? Well, Mr. Morris, my family, we always try to give them food and they knock it out of their hands and say they don't want it. Okay, well, if that happened to you, I'm sorry, but I guarantee you most homeless people are pretty hungry and they'll take it. They may want the money to go do something else with it, but, at some point we're hungry. All right? I love records. I really want to buy a couple of records I've got in my Amazon cart. They've been sitting there for a while. I'm hungry, too. At the end of the day, when I ate, y'all saw my lunch was a bagel. All right? At about 3 o'clock, when the end of the day comes, and I'm getting in my car, and I'm driving by, and I smell, McDonald's. If I stop at McDonald's, I may not be able to get that record this month. Oh well, McDonald's smells really good and I'm going to get that food because I'm hungry and I'm fat and I like to eat. All right? So the idea here is that this car trying to hit the turtle, it's a lot like just the way life came at these people. You know, some things just accidentally happen. You know, drought, things like that you can't control. But there's a lot of things deliberately working against these people too. You notice the video we had about the stock market? If Jake's got money in the bank and he's not gambling on the stock market, he's just putting his 10% of his check every time he gets paid into the bank. You know what happened around the Great Depression to his money? He didn't do anything wrong with it. Does that mean he got his money back? No, he didn't get it. He lost out too, even though he didn't do anything wrong. It still hits you. I don't know if you guys ever watched it. I know it's an old movie, but sometimes maybe your parents are nostalgic like me. Did you see the movie at Christmas time, It's a Wonderful Life? Have you ever seen that? That's exactly what happened at that bank. There's only so much money in the bank, and there's not enough to cover. If all of you, if I have a little small bank, and all of you come to me and you each give me $300, so I have whatever that adds up to, okay? And then I use some, and the bank makes money by investing that into the stock market. It's really kind of how the banks still work. But if I lose a bunch of money, let's say I was stupid and bought a bunch of stock in GameStop thinking it was going to stay way up here, knowing it's not, and now it's down here, and then all of a sudden Randy finds that out, and he's like, I got to get my money out of the bank, and he tells Thomas, and Thomas tells Johnny, and before long you all know that the bank's losing money, so you rush down there to get there, but I've only got $900 in there. So you three get your money, and what happens to the rest of you? Sorry, I don't have it. What are you going to do? I mean, you can punch. Hunter can punch me. Still not going to find. You're not going to punch me hard enough to get $300 to come out of my ears. You're just out of money at that point. Now, thank God for things like the FDIC. Now that would be protected. But the fact was back then it wasn't. So you could do everything right, and life could still, like a car, steer at you and try to hit you. No matter what you did, this turtle's just trying to walk across the road, or get across the road, and this person's like, I'm going to hit it. You know, pretty garbage thing, but it happens. Now let's finish it. His front wheels struck the edge of the shell, flipped the turtle like a tiddlywink, spun it like a coin, and rolled it off the highway. The truck went back to its course along the right side. Lying on its back, the turtle was tight in its shell for a long time, but at last its legs waved in the air, reaching for something to pull it over. Its front foot caught a piece of quartz, and little by little the shell pulled over and flopped upright. The wild oat head fell out, and 3 of the spearhead seeds stuck in the ground. As the turtle crawled on down the embankment, its shell dragged dirt over the seeds. The turtle entered a dust road and jerked itself along, drawing a wavy, shallow trench in the dust with its shell. The old, humorous eyes looked ahead, and the horny beak opened a little. His yellow toenails slipped a fraction in the dust. Notice that was the same thing we saw near the beginning. Right back doing the same old thing, keeps on pushing. Okay, so one of the things about people from this time period, we're about to watch that video on the Okies, that you definitely want to see is that these people, despite all their hardships, they kept trying. We talk again, when we want to apply this to the American dream, that is an element of what gets you the American dream. All right? You don't get this entitlement that we have now. Like, I was born in America, I deserve this, and this is wrong. You don't get stuff for nothing. Y'all love to say that to me all the time about why we shouldn't have free stuff for people, but then you don't live that in your own lives. You expect, I go to college, my parents pay tuition, I deserve an A. Not if you don't work for it. And that's what we see with this turtle. This turtle's representing these people, is the effort they put in. Even when it looked like everything was against them, they still pushed. Now that's in the American spirit back from that time period. You want to talk about things that made America great? That was it. It wasn't a political party. It wasn't, whatever your beliefs were. It was that effort. It's the fact that we're going to try, even when it looks like there's no chance. We don't give up. We don't quit. We are a nation of quitters at this point. Things don't go our way. We make up excuses. We complain. We don't get out there and keep working. Look, stuff's not fair. Do you think those people that got busted by, like my example of Jake during the Great Depression, you think that was fair? What are you going to do? Cry about it? Nothing's going to change? What do? You get in your car, you drive out west, and you hope something's going to help you. And you keep trying. Because the other option is to die. Just to give up. And that was it. So this is one of the things that makes America the place it is that's special. And that's what makes books like this really worth reading, is you see people who had a hard time and still stuck it out and gave a shot. I wasn't going to say what you thought it was. Gave it a shot and kept going. All right? And that is just something that's been lost. All right? You see it now with, like, if Jake, I'm going to use Jake as my example again, but if poor Jake comes in here and he bombs his first test in English class, you know how often, I'm so tempted when I grade those first tests not to give you your actual grade, because y'all give up. Oh, well, I'm just going to fail again. Especially when I taught public school, because those kids could fail and just take summer school. So if they were going to bomb, they're like, oh, that's okay. I'll just take summer school. I'll make up, 9 months of school in 4 weeks. That's fine. But you can't do that in life. But we do see people trying it. Think about marriages. Me and my wife are fighting. I guess we'll just give up. Try, just done. I'll find somebody else. Yeah, because good luck finding somebody you're never going to fight with. You know how you pull that off? You don't ever speak to each other. That's about it. All right? So this turtle here is meant as an allegory for these people who are struggling through all these hard times. Does it resolve at the end? Does the turtle get to some magic, turtle paradise? Nope, he's right back on the road where he was to begin with. Different side of the highway. What's on the other side of the highway? And this is what makes allegories clever. This side of the highway, he had this dirt road. He comes to the highway. He crosses the highway. What's on the other side of the highway? Another dirt road. You get through one set of problems, you get another set. Guess what? That's life. You can quit or you can keep going. And that's one of the great things about the stories from this time period. Is it really indicates what people were like when they kept going before we became a bunch of quitters. Now, not everybody's like that. Some of you in here are hard workers and you bust your tail no matter what, and good for you. But you can't tell yourself that I'm not right about as a whole. We give up really easy. We really do. All right. Okay, we're going to look at the video on the Okies in a minute, but since I'm recording this video, I want to go ahead and do the discussion part so I don't have to make multiple videos. So if you guys will flip over real quick to page 767. We don't usually cover these middle sections that are like, documents from the time period and all, because this isn't a history class. But I think this is really fascinating. This is a time period that I'm really interested in. Because, guys, let me tell you something. As soon as coronavirus hit us, a year ago, I was terrified about what was going to happen, okay? Our school immediately called the teachers in it, and thank God for this, because, man, this is Mr. Messer and Mr. Sander for really putting this together for us. If this had been like 5 years ago, I would have had a job. But they had said we had collected a lot of debt, done a lot of things the right way, and there was money put aside where even if we had to stay closed this year, they could have protected us as teachers. Now, it might have been tight, but we weren't going to lose our jobs over it, which is awesome. That was really big. I needed to hear that. My wife's a nurse, and I don't care what you heard on TikTok or YouTube or anything else. Hospitals aren't making money on COVID. They might get paid if someone gets diagnosed with it. It's to make up for the fact that they have no way to do surgeries right now. Because that's what I was worried about. My wife does a lot of elective surgeries. If there's no room for people to have recovery after surgery, because the beds are all filled with COVID people who half of them aren't going to pay their bills, they got to cancel elective surgeries. That's where they make their money. So you've got my stents, which weren't elective surgeries, but if I had to have room for them, I had 3 stents put in. It was about an hour-long surgery at best. It was $80,000. If they don't get that money, and instead they're getting $1,000 or $2,000 for COVID, how many COVID people do they have to get to make up my $80,000? A lot. And that's just me and that one surgery, not to mention all the other people that came through there. The hospitals aren't making bank off of this, all right? Even though we tell ourselves that's the case, they're not. So the fact is that I look at how I felt right then. Like I was worried Mitzi was going to lose her job. Mitzi's not a COVID nurse. She's not an emergency room nurse. She could do it, but if she lost her job and got laid off, we were going to not be able to pay our bills. I've got a 7th grader at home. He doesn't understand how that works. My older kid would have understood, but Maddox doesn't understand. I got to tell him, hey, I'm sorry, Christmas this year, we're not going to be able to buy you any toys. Can't get you anything, And he'd be okay, but, that would hurt. My kids are spoiled. They get way more than they should. So that's all I was thinking. I couldn't sleep for weeks. It was just catching sleep when I could. Thank God we weren't in school. Y'all didn't have to listen to me be a grouch. All right? So I'm sitting there looking at that situation and comparing it to what these people went through, and I'm like, wow, I don't even know how they did this. I mean, these are some champs. And immediately after this, these people are going to run into World War II. And again, have to go off and fight in that. So when the people talk about the greatest generation, they mention these people, that's why. Because I'm not going to lie to you guys, there wasn't days where I was sitting there thinking, like, if I lost my job, I've got $400,000 worth of life insurance. And I was thinking, if I got to provide for my family, that's what my options are. And I was like, and God will understand. It's bad when you get to thinking that way. All right? I wasn't the only one that thought that way, trust me. A lot of people went through that same pattern of thinking. So looking at these people and what they went through, I'm beyond impressed. And some of them didn't make it, but they didn't give up. That's what I was thinking about doing, right? These guys toughed it out. Now let's look at these pictures. You remember we saw this picture up here in the video. That is the most famous picture from this time period, all right? At least from this event, okay? Look at the situation. That one on the left is the picture people know, but there's two more. They actually took several pictures. Look what they're living in that bottom right picture. And look at how awful those kids look. Let me read you a little bit of the background on this picture. It says, Dorothea Lange took these photographs in February or March of 1936 in Nipomo, California, while she was on assignment photographing migrant farm workers. She later gave this account of the experience. She said, I saw and approached the hungry and desperate mother as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions. I made 5 exposures, working closer and closer from the same direction. I did not ask her name or her history. She told me her age, that she was 32. She said that they had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that the children killed. That's what they've been eating. Now, not frozen vegetables like you got them out of the freezer. Like it's cold, it's freezing out there. They're digging up vegetables that are frozen and eating that. They probably don't have much of a way to cook them. A lot of those aren't good to eat at this point. And then what are the kids killing? Birds. Eating birds is a good way to get sick. That's a good way to get sick. Don't kill some raven and eat it. You are going to be in a lot of pain later on, okay? She had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. Now, okay, so she had a car, awesome. She just sold the tires to buy food because she's that hungry. Because guess what now is going to happen? She going to be able to go anywhere? No. She's basically mortgaging any kind of getting out of there to just buy tires because she wants to feed her kids. But now she has no way to get that car to go anywhere. So she's going to survive that meal, but what next? Guys, this is the way a lot of poor people are today still. All right? You know, we're very lucky, most of us, if not all of us in this room. This is a different kind of poverty, okay? There she sat in that lean-to tent with her children huddled around her and seemed to know that my pictures might help her, and so she helped me. There was a sort of equality about it. All right? It's really sad that this woman's going through this and what she went through and how she could handle that. Because, guys, I don't want to look weak to you guys right now, but I'm gonna give y'all a moment of me being a weak person here. Besides me talking about I almost thought about ending it back a year ago, and then I almost died on my own. But I couldn't imagine. Look at the age of those kids there. Those kids don't understand. She's got a baby, and to sit there and have to watch them suffer, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. That's one of the things that I'm glad Maddox is in middle school now, because if he was in 3rd grade or if he was 2 or 3, to tell them, hey, look, I don't have food for you, and listen to them cry because they're hungry, that's terrifying, man. I hate snakes. I'd rather be in a bed full of poisonous snakes than listen to my kids scream because they're hungry. You know, this is to me is my biggest fear is this sort of thing. So the fact that these people are just enduring this on a day-to-day basis, and some of them it went on for years and years and years. You saw when they talked about the stock market. Did you know it got that bad? You know it went down a lot on that day. You noticed it lost 90% of its value. They said it kept going down for 3 years. I mean, the amount of people who were in this situation, this is just a sampling. It's pretty terrifying, all right? Okay, let's flip over to the next page. And I'm going to stop the recording here, so I'm talking to you guys, but also this. I have the actual version of him singing this, which y'all are all going to hate, by the way. All right, I get that. But I want to talk a little about Woody Guthrie, and then I'm going to stop my recording, and we're going to look at the video on the Okies. And if there's time, look at this too. Because there's some really interesting symbolism in this, particularly in the last line. What's the last line of this song? Look over on page 769. I know you all can read. Last line.
And I just blowed in, and I'll soon blow out again.
Good. It seems like it's just a basic, I'm going through town, no big deal. I just got in, I'm going to go out again. He's not talking about that. They're talking about life in general. Their life. It's just that they don't, at this point, they feel like they don't matter. And, that's what this whole thing is about. That life has become a chore for them, and, actually death's the only kind of way that you're going to get relief. Do you guys know anything about the guy that wrote this? He's got a really famous song that you know by heart. The guy's name is Woody Guthrie. This Land Is Your Land is his song. He wrote that. The old patriotic song. I'm not going to sing it for you because nobody needs that pain. All right. That song has lots of verses to it, by the way. not just the ones you sang in school. It is not quite as patriotic as you think it is. It is in a way, all right? But it's not quite exactly what you think. I put on here, so we're going to watch this video next on the Okies, just give you a little bit of background on them. This is the version of this little song of him singing it. And then finally, down here, you got This Land Is Your Land. This is a more modern version of it. They sing 3 of the verses, the 2 that you know, and then the third one, which I had a hard time finding a song that actually covered it. They usually don't include it. But that's on there too. And it talks about Woody Guthrie was not so much for things like private property. So it's an interesting song when you look at it in the context of what we think is patriotic today versus what maybe he thought back then. But that's on there. I'm not going to make you listen to that. That's there just in case you're curious, okay? I don't want to get into that fight. But it's on there. It's worth listening to. They're good singers, especially if you like country or bluegrass type music. These guys are really, they do a good job with this. There's a Bruce Springsteen version that's really good too, but I didn't play it because he doesn't sing that verse, which shocks me greatly. He didn't sing it, so I didn't want to include it. All right, so I'm going to stop this, and we're going to look at 2 things in here. Again, the Dust Bowl Blues right here, that's this song. You could hear what it sounded like. Again, I'm not going to torture you with it because, y'all are going to look at me like I'm an idiot. I want you to understand I don't like this kind of music. I respect this guy a lot. But, old-timey folk bluegrass is not for me, all right? He does a good job if you want to listen to it, though. But we are going to look at the video about him. So before we do that, though, I'm going to go ahead and end my video. The people at home can watch these on their own, okay?